welcome. We have a fabulous panel with us today in the event sector, and I'd like to welcome Liesel Short from Alice Events Consulting. I'd like to welcome Rudy van der Pfeiffer from We Are Virtual, and of course, Nina Fraser-Pretorius, who needs no introduction, from the conference company. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tess.
So we've been through a very challenging year. I don't think there's anybody of us in this industry that's not been affected in one way or another. And our panel today are going to explore some experiences and some challenges that they've had to face and in fact are still facing. And I'd like to start with you, Liesel. In terms of this tsunami that has hit us, what has been your greatest challenge and what did you have to do to stay afloat?
Okay, so as my core business is corporates and incentives, incentive travel, that part of the industry was obviously very hard hit. So I had to really go and rethink and reimagine and redesign the way forward in terms of events. Because you can't go out anymore, you can't go to a restaurant, or you can't go to a venue, and you are limited by the amount of people. So what's the way forward? So for me, the obvious way forward was to take the events home to the people themselves. So one way of doing that was I did a style shoot last year where I took someone's bra area and I completely transformed it to how fabulous that could look. So that was a one way of taking events home and taking someone's backyard or front yard or their area and make it really pretty so that they can still have a fabulous event, but it's only with a core group of people and with their loved ones. Another way of rethinking was also not everybody has the place in their home or has a dedicated space in their home. That's their home office. So normally office would be sitting at the dining room table, or it would be sitting on the couch in the lounge or wherever. And when you need to have Zoom meetings or team meetings, then it's absolute chaos around you. So the other thinking was you actually move into someone's house and you pretty up the area behind them so that when they have this meeting, it is beautiful and professional. There are companies that took it a step further to actually print beautiful backdrops that's standing permanently at the back. So
that is absolutely fabulously creative.
Yes. So it's something else that's also popped up is called dinner in a box and decor in a box. So basically, and that's what I'm actually currently doing with one of my clients, is they got VIP clients that they want to give a special treat to. They want to give them a fabulous three-course dinner with some wine tasting from one of our wine farms. But how do you do it? Because they don't want to go out. So we've teamed up with a 4-star restaurant, and they've put in this beautiful menu together, and it's beautifully packaged and packed in a box. And I have designed a whole decor box. So a decor box is everything that you need to make it look pretty by your table. So it's your base plate and your glasses and your cutlery and flowers and a printed menu and a lacquer card inside that says, you know, enjoy the evening. This is your wine pairing, etc., etc. So we have had to think, never mind how to do things beautifully and creatively, really had to think creatively on how to move forward and really to do things differently. And then, of course, the other branch that I've added to LSEC is Box Glam, which is, you know, curated gift boxes, because online is the way forward. People don't necessarily want to go and spend time in shopping centers and what do I need to buy, and I need to buy a gift and I need to buy this, and corporates want to give gifts to their clients to say, hey, we are thinking of you. Here's a little something to pamper yourself with. So you know, so I've started to put those boxes together. That's got
Wonderful
coffee, tea in it, and all things like that. So it's all things that we just had to think differently to try and stay afloat till hopefully.
Thank you, Liesel. That is absolutely spectacular. I love the creativity. Nina, may we come to you? Our world has had to switch to virtual, and more recently that we've been allowed to have some numbers in venues. we've gone hybrid. What are the complexities, and let's say how difficult or how easy was it for your clients to make the switch?
I think, first of all, thank you, Tess, for inviting us. Lovely to be with everyone today. And I think it sounds like we all need some of Liesel's fairy dust. Sounds lovely, Liesel. I'm definitely coming to one of those braais, even if it's virtually, that you're arranging. I think what we've had to do, Tess, is not so much hybrid. We've had to initially with our lockdown, because the lockdowns became more severe, we actually went to fully virtual. And in a sense, that was an easier transition, because I think hybrid comes with a whole lot of complexities, and potentially that's the future of conferencing will be the hybrid component. So we very much have only done fully virtual, and in a sense it's actually easier either face-to-face or fully virtual. So I think the challenge that we're facing as organizers is that obviously many companies and corporates or association clients, and that's the sector we work in, all have a Zoom and a Teams license. But I think conferencing is more than a Zoom and a Teams license at the end of the day. And so it's really educating, taking people on the journey. We're learning, they're learning. And how can we make sure that it's not only about sharing of information and knowledge and a presenter presenting content or research, but also another opportunity for meeting and engaging for some exhibition components, some networking. We can include Liesel's gift boxes and everyone can have their yummy biscuit or cappuccino or whatever is in the gift box that is presented, and actually then network with those other individuals around the world. I think that the research is telling us that people quite like that, because what's happened, and I think you were very involved, Tess, in a South African CVB sort of webinar, and with all the borders being shut, but there's still research happening and people want to share experiences or knowledge. This is happening in Africa. Is it happening in Europe? What's happening in North America? That sort of thing. Is that it allows students, researchers, and universities to actually engage more often, regularly. I don't think it's going to take away the face-to-face, but it has actually given us another whole opportunity and an avenue for research and sharing. So I think virtual, there's some positivity. I would love to rather be at Liesel's braai and see Rudy for a coffee and meet with all of you together. But whilst we can't do that, I think we have to embrace the virtual platform. And I think then we're going to start going into hybrid. I'm not sure when we will be doing fully hybrid, because obviously in South Africa, with our restrictions in place until the 15th of April, having a meeting for only 100 people, in a way, it's actually cheaper to just be virtual.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that, Nina. Rudy, jumping over to you, you've also had some interesting experiences and pivoting phases. What are client expectations out there?
Tess, thank you. Yeah, and I have to agree with Nina and Liesel firstly, and I think the adaptation that we all had to quickly get our heads around. I think luckily for some of us, we were already kind of exposed to the hybrid elements and a little bit of virtual coming in when working with our international partners, and especially with Nina would have had a lot of experience with that also with the ICA conferences and those type of larger events, where they've historically already brought in hybrid components in a much smaller segment or in a smaller way, but we've already had some sort of exposure. So I think that was at least a benefit for us, that we knew a bit about it. We knew how it generally would work, how you'd like to scope it. But of course, then the technicalities and all those type of things hit home when you really want to start implementing that. From a client perspective, I think the element that we've kind of had to get barriers across barriers has really been where clients are from a virtual or a hybrid component, because we've actually done quite a few hybrids. And to your point, Nina, 100%, there's been kind of 100 delegation, excluding your crew. So say about an 80 delegation within about 20 crew members for the hybrid event. But what we've seen is that some clients have started almost, as the early adopters. They said, let's first do a smaller hybrid event so that we can get comfortable before we start doing the larger ones. So I think it's also a nice, almost a progression that you can take with your clients. to first get them comfortable with a hybrid setup, with a smaller controlled environment, and then go into the larger ones. Because at the end of the day, clients, when they need to throw money at something, they're very comfortable with live events, but there's a lot of education, reassurance that we need to do with clients and get them comfortable with the hybrid component. So I think that being a benefit, but it's with some clients. Other clients obviously don't see that. They rather want to, or they're a bit more aggressive on the costing side. And then they may opt for what Nina mentioned, is to, for now, just do fully virtual. Another element that we found from a client perception that we really need to educate on, and that's quite a stumbling block, is clients have the strange perception that we can now suddenly control everyone's connection when it's virtual. And that is a big barrier, because then a client is extremely upset if one of the speakers couldn't join, or they didn't have a good experience, their screen hooked, or there was buffering, or those type of elements, or someone sitting, I don't know, on the edge of Pofadder, and they couldn't get a connection, and they didn't have a stable, experience with the event. So that's a big kind of educational point to get across to our clients. What we've done is just to try and bring it home for them. If I can maybe just give an example of what we've tried to explain it to a client, is the connection and the bandwidth that one of their delegates have is effectively the same as a delegate's car when they have to drive to an event or a venue. We can't control that the car has petrol in. We can't control that the tires are good and all of that, and that the delegate's not going to get stranded along the way. So that's the way that we try and explain that complexity to a client. So I think that's in general the major stuff from an educational point of view, and almost the barriers, once you've kind of adopted it internally, to then move it to the client space.
Thank you for that, Rudy. Nina, I'm just going to come back to you for a moment. You know what, in this relatively new world of virtual experiences, there is so much out there. How do clients choose their platform? What advice would you give them?
I think there are a number, I think it's quite confusing, because I think it's very much, I love Rudy's analogy about driving your car and you don't have control. And I just would like to go back to that, because I think it's a very interesting point. Tess, I know we didn't touch on it when we were preparing for our session, but I think one of the other interesting things is that we've had quite a few requests from clients asking, can we pay for our delegates' data? So, for example, like if you're at the university and you're a student, you can log in and you're allowed to then watch that for free. And I think that's an interesting area where technology is obviously, advancement is going to happen. The platform that we work on, we actually asked the guys, how much data would you use, or what is the bandwidth or whatever? And they thought we were completely mad, because they're Australian, UK based, and because their data is a little bit more accessible, it's like fresh air, it's expected, or like public transport, it should just work and be efficient. We don't have that in Africa and in South Africa. And I think that's quite a large barrier to entry. And we often get that could prevent our students, our young people, our, to be able to watch that if your university doesn't have the access. So the data issues are very interesting, and maybe for another discussion. I think choosing your platform is more about choosing your partner, because I think one of the other things that has become a challenge is that whilst virtual is online, I think doing rehearsals, we met a little bit before and we had a bit of a discussion, and ours is just very much a discussion today. But if you've got a strong academic session or content, you have to have a rehearsal. You potentially should have a pre-recording as a backup to Rudy's concern. If a bandwidth doesn't work, that backup can come in. And what we found is that the pre-recording is better. So I think choosing a platform is very much about choosing your partner. You're going to need to work with the PCO. You're going to, the product needs to deliver to your needs and your specifications and your requirements. And I think a lot of clients, whilst it's a lot cheaper than a face-to-face conference, there's still costs, and it's labor costs that we're paying for. So it's not so much the licensing fees and maybe even the production and editing, but it's the time getting it together and setting the whole panel and the program. If you've got 200 presenters and all those recordings are coming in. So that we're finding that the labor cost, people don't actually appreciate that it's, this is how it comes about. They just see the pretty picture and these are your fairy dust at the end. They don't realize the work behind the scenes. So I think choosing the right partner with a platform that speaks to you. I think also Rudy touched on the cost, that if you just want a Zoom call, fabulous, you go for it, or you send people a link. But if you want the engagement, it's going to cost more. And if you have a number of papers or presentations, you do need to calculate in the cost of the preparation time to actually put it together, to have a professional product and have a professional brand. So sorry, Tess, I really answered your question in a roundabout way, because I think the technology is changing. There's some fantastic products. But I think a product is like, Rudy, like your car. So first of all, you need to put the petrol in the car and have the car available. But I mean, you must have checked the tires and the oil, and you need to know how to drive the car and have a map. So it doesn't help that you buy this fantastic product potentially as the client, but then you don't know how to operate it. It's like Excel. When your accountant shows you all the spreadsheets, looks fabulous. But if you have to do it, can you do the same as the accountant? And I think that's the understanding that we need to portray to our clients, and that is the time and effort, and that is what we're charging them for, to demonstrate that. So choosing a partner, choosing a platform, I think the two go hand in hand.
Thank you, Nina. Let's just stay with you for a moment. In terms of a hybrid event, in your experience, would you say it's more work than a live event in terms of preparation?
Yes, Tess, I do think so, because if you had to think about it, essentially, it's like we're asking Liesel to organize a party, and the party's at her house, and she's getting the caterers and getting everyone and screening everyone and doing all the normal stuff we used to do. But then Nina's sitting up in the sky or in the office running the virtual, and we're running at them at the same time. So Liesel and Nina have to run it behind the scenes, for example. So it's nearly like having two teams. Just as an example, you know, for example, if I'm attending virtually and Tess, you're the chairperson of the session, and Liesel and Rudy are presenting and they've done their presentations, they can either do it in person at the venue or they can come in virtually. So obviously there's a technical team, but behind the scenes, you're then chairing and I want to ask a question, but I'm virtual, I'm not in the audience. So someone has to watch the virtual platform as well as what's happening in the audience and make sure that it runs quite seamlessly and everybody's questions and engagement is raised. And if they're not, to address them at a later stage, or for that presenter. So in a sense, you need two facilitators. You might need Tess and Rudy because Liesel and Susan are presenting and Nina's the virtual delegate. So all of a sudden, I would say it's nearly two teams. And to make sure that it works cohesively and that you don't leave out your virtual delegates and that they feel like the poor relation, they also need to feel important, they engage, and they might be more clever or able to contribute more. How do you make sure that their comments and engagement are put together?
Absolutely.
So I think it is more expensive, Tess. Yes, sorry, short answer.
More expensive and a lot more work, indeed. Rudy, I'm pretty sure that you have something to add for us there. What is your experience?
Thanks, Nina, and agree 100% with Nina. Just maybe quickly, just jumping back to the question you raised to Nina in terms of how to choose the platform. And I agree with Nina. I think in the beginning of COVID, there were only a few platforms that you could really select from that were of a certain standard. But the guys have really worked on developing the platforms and creating all the functionality. And now we've got, as for what you've got conference venues, you've got a plethora of platforms that can cater to everything that the client needs and more. So I think, again, not to forget what we do as event managers is just bring it back to the client's objectives. Always measure it against the objective. If the platform is completely overboard and it's too much for the objectives, and that's obviously a pricing element that gets attached to that, it's our job to guide our clients to the right platform as well. And of course, that's where the benefit comes in for a client if they don't try and do everything themselves, and if they actually use an experienced event management company, because we've got the experience, we've got the guidance, we've bumped our heads so that the client doesn't have to bump their head. So I think that's an important element for us, is to keep that structure that we've always had with events and focus on the objectives. And then secondary to that, the return on investment for the client. Same as with a live event, an event should never just be an expense line item. We're not just spending money for the sake of spending money. We're trying to achieve objectives and have a return on investment. And that is the guidance that we can give a client, like Nina mentioned, for example. If the client, their objective would be reached by purely having a webinar or even a Zoom meeting, why do they want to go and spend on a massive platform? I mean, we'll all, of course, take the money if they want to throw it away. But I mean, that's for us, that's where our guidance comes in to guide the client. And then perhaps just in terms of the complexity, just a point on that, also fully agree with Nina. I think with a hybrid event, you're now actually sitting with a virtual event and a live event that you have to run. For a client, they think it's quite easy because it's the same thing. You're just basically streaming what I'm doing live, but it's not. There's quite a few complexities around that. Some speakers don't like their sessions to be streamed live or streamed at all. So there you need to create a bit of a studio with a filler for your for your virtual delegates. And 100% agree with Nina on the experience. At the end of the day in events, we are creating an experience. It's not just putting a little video clip there. Anyone can find a video clip on YouTube. But how do we still create that engagement, make sure that our virtual delegates are engaged, that they're part of the event, that they partake in the event? Because we've seen from the statistics, as soon as someone is engaged, there's up to a 30% higher retention of the content and the knowledge that is shared in the event. So we can't not engage our virtual audience as well, because we're going to lose return on investment for a client. So definitely a lot more complex. And I think as a closing point on that one, and that's where clients also have a misperception that, okay, well, now my event is hybrid, I've got a smaller audience, so why do I still need the same budget? But if you want to create engagement, and especially for a hybrid component, you still have those expenses from a live event, although smaller, but you do need to actually fund and spend wisely on the virtual platform to still reach your objectives and retain maximum ROI.
Thank you, Rudy. I'm going to stop with the technical side of things for a bit and go back to Liesel and looking at sustainability. I think sustainability is a very important factor for all our clients these days. And we need to get creative around that as well. In fact, I found that the advent of COVID-19 has kind of hijacked some sustainability projects and issues. But in your world, Liesel, what can you do and what have you done in terms of promoting sustainability?
Let me just understand the question correct. Sustainability in terms of keeping clients and making sure that there are options for them available to do events, or sustainability when you actually do an event and there's no wastage and things like that.
That's pretty much what we're referring to, you know, kind of looking after nature and
okay, well,
up to you.
Interestingly enough, talking about virtual and hybrid events, I actually have an event, a fully fledged event, end of March at Arabella Hotel and Spa for 70 people. So, and interestingly enough, that client came to me and say, you know, but obviously money is tight, and it's, you know, we don't really want to waste anything, and we don't want to be seen spending money, but we actually need to get together and we need to decide on things, etc., and we wanted to look pretty and so on. So basically, all that I'm doing is we are the centerpiece, for example, is aloes and herbs and vegetables and fruit. And the aloes and succulents will go to the hotel afterwards to get planted in their gardens. And the produce is going to go to a local soup kitchen. So, yeah. So
that is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, those are the kind of components that we're looking for. And then I'm going to Nina and Rudy, any case studies from your side? What is your experience?
I think that one of the challenges we're going to face is that, you know, I'm working with at the end of the year, we've got a big international conference, and what the South African travel restrictions and the vaccine rollout perhaps being not the silver bullet we wanted or as quick as it's happening. And And also, you know, everybody's has been hit. Not only in South Africa, I think across the world, everybody's you know, been hit by COVID-19 and the restrictions to trade and economies. And I think all of a sudden, sort of from a university component, people say, well, hold on, we've got travel restrictions. We don't want you to travel, but we want the research and the content and the knowledge economy to continue. Is that I wonder how many are people going to get back on a plane, you know, so quickly? It will be interesting to see. I know some countries have sort of gone back immediately, and I was just reading prior to us starting our discussion today that Madrid is looking at May having a trade fair that they want to host. They're quite nervous because Madrid was hit really hard by the pandemic and the impact on their communities, but they really want to start again. They'll obviously put the restrictions, and everyone's going to be watching and seeing how that's going to work. And in a way, if it does work and they have got the restrictions, that'll be a beautiful case study. But if it doesn't work and it's a super spreader event, how do you deal with the liability in that? So I'm sorry, I digress about speaking about the economic impact and environmental. I just think, isn't it an opportunity to rethink how we do things? I think it's great that you do travel, but maybe you travel less. Maybe like a vaccination card, maybe we must all have a travel card, and you're only allowed to travel so many miles per year. I know it'll restrict us a bit, but would that not help a little bit? Would it not be better from a you know, saving the oceans, saving our airs, saving our planet, because the planet belongs to all of us. So I don't know, I'm quite pro looking at it a little bit differently. I used to travel so extensively, and I have to say I do like being at home, and I'm still talking to people. I miss the chatting and that personal and social engagement, but I do question, hold on, all the time I spent in the airport, wasted time, all the cost, the actual financial implication. I think those things just on an individual level, and then if one multiplies that out, and then the economic impact that we're just hearing, you know, how the world is being impacted by fossil fuels and by, you know, all our travel. So I'm quite pro a change, Tess. I know I'm not going to be that popular.
No, but that's massive food for thought. Thanks for that, Nina. Rudy, I can see you nodding your head. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Tess. And again, Nina and I seem to definitely be on the same page, well, all of us. But I think, again, I mean, we could look at everything as doom and gloom, and the way we used to do things are not the way anymore, and all of that. But at the end of the day, I mean, change is evident, or it is going to happen. And I think the faster we adapt, the better for all of us. And there's always clever ways. I mean, as Nina mentioned now, I think even with some things that on the surface look disruptive and bad, if we dig down a little bit deeper, and to Nina's point, for example, with carbon emissions, with flying less, and people will fly less, especially over the next few years, as lockdowns and regulations ease up, that will naturally have an effect on sustainability with events, because you're going to have a much larger virtual audience. You can reach a much wider audience. You can have international speakers at your event without having to necessarily cater for them, add them onto massive traveling budgets. So we can actually stretch a client's budget further. They can perhaps use some of those budget or that to plow back into their sustainability initiatives regarding their live portion of their event, because you've now saved them a little bit of money. So that's a humanitarian effort that they can put towards their brand, again, showing that they are part of the global community. I also think that there's definitely going to be two camps as we get out of regulations, and as that kind of fizzles away. I'm a firm believer that we will have our audience that they are dead set. I do live events. I don't like the virtual. And then, especially with our Generation Z and those type of people coming up, they grew up with virtual platforms. For them, a meeting, I mean, we hosted an event, funny enough, end of last year, a hybrid event for one of our clients. And one of the staff members, she did all of her interviews virtually. She did all the scoping for this event, all the meetings. She hadn't been into the office once. She worked for them for 3 months before she actually met her colleagues for the first time at our hybrid event. So it was very interesting to see her saying hi to their colleagues for the first time, but she'd worked for the company for 3 months. and they've got their work done. It's comfortable for them. So I think we're definitely going to have two distinct camps: people that are seeing the benefit in virtual in terms of time saving, cost saving, sustainability, all of those elements. And then you are going to have your group that say, you know what, I like my live interaction. And that's the reason why I believe that, as Nina said, and Liesel as well, I do believe that hybrid is going to be the sustainable way that events will be held forward. I do think our live events will get a lot smaller, for budget constraints and all those type of elements. And where it's functional, they can then add the virtual component or do a fully virtual event. So I think we're actually creating a whole new segment or niche within our industry. It's not necessarily taking anything away. I think we are actually going to be a bit better off with this forced change that we have had to implement.
Thanks,
Yes,
Rudy.
I wanted to add something. Sorry, I think just to add to what Rudy's saying is that you'll have these two camps. I think the other interesting thing that, because we're all organizers and try and be creative people, Liesel is our most creative theory person, and that's, I say that with the greatest love and respect. But I think that I think the sector that's going to definitely feel this is going to be convention centers. I think that they're very, hotels can always have a party or a wedding or, something creative or a get together or a smaller meeting. But, from an eco perspective and around the world, we've globally seen the growth of convention centers because bringing bigger conferences, more conferences. But if you look at the eco statistics report, the meetings, to Rudy's point, has already started getting smaller and much more focused. And maybe it was a really specifically focused key area that, you're not only a doctor anymore, we're now speaking about a specific research area. So meetings had already started becoming smaller, and we'd already started seeing in 2018 a trend that universities were quite popular due to the costing. So what we have seen, and it was quite interesting, is that I've seen a lot of venues across the globe are offering a hybrid meeting, or maybe there's live streaming. And to me, I think it's obviously a survival technique because they have to have some revenue stream, because otherwise there's nothing really coming in. But the challenge is that, all of a sudden the lines are great. Are they the PCO or the organizer, or are they the venue? And what is going to happen to that sector of our market?
Well, Nina, that was in fact my next question. We've seen some venues setting up their own platforms. So would that be a threat or a potential partnership? So we've just heard your take on it. Rudy, do you have a different opinion?
No, I agree with Nina, and like Nina said, this is not a new trend. We have seen meetings getting smaller. And some meetings where they would have traditionally had one big meeting, they would divide it into two smaller meetings, for example, but still in effectively still sitting with a smaller net delegation. So say where they would have traditionally had a meeting of 1,000 delegates, they'll now rather do two meetings of 200 delegates each because of that content sharing, and because it's quite content heavy, and they want to have that time to spend with the delegates, to go through exercises. It's the same thing as if you look at, in education. The smaller the class size, the more personal the interaction, and generally the better the quality of students that come out of that. So we've seen that trend. I do think in terms of venues trying to do their own platforms, and from what I've seen is they are not the experts in that, and they do struggle with that a bit. And I think that's where the cost element has come in, because we've seen the venue's platform costs be drastically higher than what an event organizer or a platform partner can provide. So there's either markups or something that's happening there that's pushing up that cost. My personal view is the venues that are going to be successful with having a platform attached to their venue in some way, shape, or form would be the guys that have followed the same route as, for example, with an in-house technical team. So they've collaborated with a technical partner, and they provide that service then as an outsourced service to an extent, but it's still in-house. So that would, I think, be the most functional way for venues. Otherwise, they are going to start, well, it is going to start becoming competition. And I think it's a dangerous space to an extent for venues, because if you're going to start competing aggressively with your other suppliers, they are just going to take the platform away completely. And then that would not be an offer or a solution to that the venue could attach on. So I think there's a big argument for collaboration. And I think we've seen that, again, it's with the meetings getting smaller over the last few years, we've seen the trend to collaborate a lot more. And certain companies and providers really focusing on what are your expertise. The event manager looks at the event holistically. They put all the moving parts together. They manage everything on the client's behalf, but manage those specific technical experts or niche partners. So yeah, I think it should be approached personally. I think it should be approached more as a collaborative approach from a venue or a convention center rather than trying to take that over completely.
Excellent. Now, thanks for that, Rudy. Now, that also brings me to relationships and partnerships. And I've heard a lot of that coming through. I'd like to bounce over to Liesl for a moment. In terms of your experience, you've obviously done a 100% pivot and came up with some really creative options and offerings. What about partnerships in your sphere? Have you created new partnerships, new relationships? How has that evolved for you? And how has all of this benefited you? Has it?
Well, I personally feel I'm a huge fan of collaborations because I have a following and the person I'm collaborating with has got a following, and put the two together and suddenly you can reach a whole lot more people. So obviously, in terms of events, I mean, I have, as far as possible, tried to keep my collaborations and my suppliers, the ones that's still around. But also, strangely enough, a lot of new collaborations have come out with doing the boxes. You know, suddenly I found someone that does boxes gorgeously. I don't have to go to Marypack. There's someone that actually does it the way that I want it done. And then suddenly you discover this place in KwaZulu-Natal that does beautiful printed sweat towels, and then suddenly you also discover this gorgeous African designer that's outside Rustenburg that I'm busy working on the African one gift box. She's actually designing a range, and she wanted to design table linen and napkins, and you know, and I just thought, well, what a fabulous collaboration. We put that together, so there's for events and there's for gift boxes. So yeah, so collaborations are very important. No one is an island. The industry is too small for that. No one, in order to get forward, you're gonna have to kind of, yes, there's competition, but you know, there's place in the sun for all of us. It is the only way to move forward, is to take hands and just work together.
Brilliant. I've actually picked up more positive than negative in this entire conversation. So there are definitely benefits to the virtual and the hybrid components. And I think one of the benefits is that you certainly can increase your numbers. So even though we may not have the thousands of people in a venue, your reach is so much bigger going virtual. And in some ways more cost effective. As Rudy, you said, and I think Nina, you also touched on the fact that you're saving on air, you're saving on accommodation, you're saving on a lot of peripheral expenses. So I think not just from the organizer's point of view or the client, but certainly from the delegate point of view, there are massive benefits. But I think we are just about there with time. May I ask everybody to give us a final sentence to wrap up? Nina, let's start with you, please.
I think the biggest thing was for us all to remain positive, and I think collaboration's definitely the way to go. I think we will come together again. I think it will be what we experienced before in conferencing, with this new adage to it, and to, you know, expose more people to the content that we're working on and sharing. But I think to remain positive, and I think taking hands, keeping each other you know, going, because I think it's really, really challenging out there. And I think from a conference organizers and maybe venues, I think we still have an opportunity to generate some revenue, maybe a lot less than before, but some of our other partners and friends, for example, in exhibition or in branding or in travel and air, I think they really, really are having a hard time. So to really support each other, remain positive, and until we come out of the COVID pandemic and are able to deal with it. Thank you, Tess.
Absolutely.
And everybody.
Thank you. Liesl, parting shot from you before we go to Rudy.
Well, I agree 100% with what Nina is saying. She took the words out of my mouth. But I mean, it's been said many times that we are a very resilient industry. We don't give up easily. I mean, you give us a problem on site an hour before guests arrive, and you have to sort it out immediately. So that is given us the training and, to move forward and to look at the bigger picture. So yeah, it's just a case of remain positive. We will
Fantastic.
get through it. Yeah.
Great. Now that resilience is a very important factor, and I think you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you there. Rudy, final word from you, please.
Perfect. Thanks, Tess. Again, I think echoing the lady's sentiments in terms of positivity, and fully agree with Liesel. We're not an industry that really goes and sits and sucks on our thumb and think, oh, we feel sorry for ourselves and all of that. I think we've all been through an event being turned completely on its head, and you have to calmly and just get it sorted out. There's no stress, because otherwise the client picks up on that. And I think the same kind of try and stay positive. I think there's a lot of potential, and it's just wrapping our head around it. It's just that fear of change that we're experiencing. So staying positive, and I think still sticking to the stuff that we know with events. Focus on the objectives. That's what the client wants to achieve with the event, and through collaboration, find the appropriate solutions for that. So I think that's a big thing. And then maybe just as a closing thought, don't be stuck in that box, that proverbial box that we need to think outside of. I think the time now to really throw away that box has come. So it's a time to be creative. So try and enjoy that. The sky is really the limit now, and we can get some new, fresh ideas, new ways of doing things to our clients. And we can create that new normal that everyone's talking about.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rudy. Well, a great thank you to our entire panel. It was a very insightful discussion, and I trust our audience got a lot of takeaways from this. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the show.